Thanks, Kelly, and good afternoon, everyone. I am so glad that you all could join us today. If you haven't met me before, my name is Marnina Miller, and I use she and her pronouns, and I have the honor of serving as the co-executive director of PWN alongside Kiva Lake Kadena. I want to thank y'all for joining the ABCs of USCHA webinar. We're here today to really prepare for the United States Conference on HIV and AIDS, which is happening in just a couple of days in the vibrant city of New Orleans. This is one of the biggest gatherings, as you all know, in our field of public health, and really to talk about the HIV epidemic. And it's a fantastic opportunity to connect with each other, to learn, and to amplify our collective voices as people living with HIV. But with so much going on at USCHA, it can be overwhelming. It probably will be about 4,000 people there, y'all. So if you're a seasoned vet, even if you're feeling really confident and excited, or even if you're a little nervous, we're here to talk about some of the critical issues that will be front and center at this USCHA's conference. We'll highlight some of those key sessions that we're really looking forward to and that many of our PWN family will be presenting at. We'll also share some of the tips on how to navigate the conference, where you can find all of us, and how to make the most of your time at USCHA. USCHA is just not a conference, y'all. It's a conference for us as people living with HIV, where we can come to learn together, to advocate, and to push for the changes that we collectively want to see. So it's the time to amplify our voices, especially as people that are the center of this epidemic. We really want to ensure that our stories and our experiences are front and center of the fight for liberation and justice. So throughout this call, please feel free to ask questions in the chat and share your thoughts. We want this to be as interactive as possible and a supportive space so that we can get to know all of the needs that you all may have. We know that everybody's super busy throughout this entire time, and so we really appreciate you joining us. USCHA is going to be a unique opportunity for us to make a difference. So let's make the most out of it together. And so with that, let's dive into the details of how we're going to get started at USCHA. So here are some of the logistics we have. We are in meeting mode on Zoom. You can mute and unmute yourself by pressing *6 or the mute button on your phone. This will be recorded. So if you happen to drop off, just know it will still be recorded and we'll be able to get that out there for you. So please ask questions in the chat or raise your hand. And I'll be your facilitator throughout this entire time that we're together. And I will pass it on over to Barb to give us some more pointers for about USCHA. And to also meet our fabulous panelists, Malcolm Reed, who uses he, him pronouns, is the founding and director and the CEO of the Unity Art Advocacy Group. We'll also have as a panelist Shannon the Queer, who uses she, her pronouns. She is the PWN, she's with PWN Louisiana chapter. Antoinette will also be one of our fabulous panelists today. Antoinette Jones, she's our national field organizer here at PWN. And Barb Cardell will also be one of our panelists. They use them, they pronouns, and they are our program director here at PWN. So for our agenda today, I just finished the welcome. We'll do a quick introduction about what USCHA is, some of the key issues to look out for. We'll discuss some of those key issues. We'll also talk about where to find us, and we'll close out with some next steps for you. So some of the goals and objectives for our call today, and by the time we finish this call today, you will know some of those key issues, some of those sessions, and some of the questions to ask our federal partners and organizations. You'll also know key places to find us at USCHA and be able to ask any questions about USCHA's conference. So at PWN, Positive Women's Network, we are the only national organization, membership body created for and by women living with HIV, trans and gender diverse folks living with HIV. Since 2008, our members have created a unified voice and collective power for women, trans and cis, gender diverse folks, and trans folks living with HIV. We believe that racial and gender justice cannot be divested from the HIV response and ground our work in our collective liberation. PWN is creating a world where all women, trans and cis, gender diverse, and trans folks living with HIV can live long, healthy, and dignified lives free from stigma, discrimination, and criminalization. Y'all, that's a tongue twister. So we are also a member of the Health Not Prisons Collective. The Health Not Prisons Collective is an intersectional national initiative that was launched in 2020 by some of our partner organizations, the Counter Narrative Project, of course, us at PWN, the Zero Project, the Transgender Law Center, and also the U.S. Caucus of People Living with HIV, or as we typically call it, the HIV Caucus. We're long-term collaborators led by and accountable to communities most impacted by HIV criminalization in the U.S. And what I love about the HNP Collective is all of the folks that are spearheading the HNP Collective are people living with HIV. So we're here to talk about Southern Joy. That is the theme for this year's USCHA. It is going to be held September the 12th to the 15th in New Orleans, and the host hotel will be the Hyatt Regency in New Orleans. So our pre-conference, I don't know if y'all have heard about it, but Black in the South, y'all, you must pre-register for Black in the South. It's a one-day convening to bring local community members, HIV activists, and movement leaders to really talk about the impact of HIV on the Black community in the Southern United States. So registration is open currently, and y'all, please join us because some of our PWN staff will also be at Black in the South. I know that I will, and a couple of other folks will be there as well. So I hope I'll see you there. And without further, oh, and yes, the after party, like Antoinette has said in the chat, the after party is sold out, but not the conference. And so I think you have until the 6th of September to register for Black in the South. And so without further ado, I'll pass it on over to Barb to let us know more about USCHA.
Oh, thank you so much for that great opening, Marnina. You know, USCHA is the biggest family reunion that is going. It has been, and I had to look it up, but the U.S. Conference on HIV and AIDS, which used to be called USCA, the U.S. Conference on AIDS, has been around since 1996. And so we have, 28 years of coming together with our family and our family is big, 4,000 people are usually how many people show up at USCHA. But I just like to go back and kind of talk about the National Minority AIDS Council, or NMAC, who have been putting it on for us for these 28 years. And, I want to lift up that NMAC says that they lead with race to urgently fight for health equity and racial justice to end the HIV epidemic in America. So when we talk about the U.S. Conference on HIV and AIDS, it is indeed the biggest gathering of advocates, of community members, of AIDS service organization, executive directors, of federal partners, of everyone who comes together to do this critical work. So when we talk about how important it is for us to be there and to know that we belong in these spaces and places, it is so important because this is where we are able to make connections and partnerships and lift up the work that we do, absolutely at our local level, but also at our federal level. So we're going to do a quick overview here, the actual conference itself. So the conference starts on Thursday, that's day one. Registration opens bright and early at 7 for people who did not have a chance to register the day before. The exhibit hall is open, and we start off with an institute. Then we have a plenary, which is a lunch session that is usually about 2 hours long. It is always packed full of amazing talent and advocates and just lifting up so much of the work that we do. Right after that, we're going to start, you're going to hear us saying it a lot because we want to make sure that everybody knows. After the plenary, the lunch plenary on the very first day, we're going to take a PWN USCHA photo. It's going to be 15 minutes, and that's going to be right after the lunch plenary. Then we go right into sessions 1 and 2 of workshops, and there is a welcome reception that evening that is being held by the U.S. conference, by NMAC, actually, sorry. And so it's going to be a great opportunity to meet and greet people who are there. Next slide. Then on Friday, we are going to go ahead and do some more of this great, amazing organizing. We have the registration is open again. We have the exhibit hall. It's actually Institute 2 that is on Friday. Then we have another lunch plenary, and we're going to go ahead and have sessions in the afternoon, as well as some affinity sessions in the evening, where we can go ahead and talk to each other. Saturday, we go ahead, and this is day 3. Registration and exhibit hall is open, and the registration is open. And just a reminder, there will be no on-site registration. So you need to know that you are registered before you show up, because there will be no opportunity to register while you are there. Exhibit hall again. Then we've got more sessions. There's not these long morning institutes that are 3 hours long that are full of amazing learning and being led by both PWN and the caucus, like we had on Thursday and on Friday. On Saturday, we just jump right in to our session 5 workshop. We have another amazing lunch plenary. Then we have workshops in the afternoon as well, and affinity sessions in the evening. And then Sunday, it all comes to a close, and we have one more session and a lunch plenary, and then we say goodbye after an amazing, amazing event. And so that is just a general overview of our schedule for the U.S. Conference on AIDS and our partnership with the National Minority AIDS Council. And Kelly, I think I turn back over to you.
Yep, I can talk about this one. So you all may have seen that the USCHA app actually just got released. And so here is like the hot tip that I learned last year when I went, is that you need to download the USCHA app. There is so much going on, and it's spread throughout so many different places that without the app, it's very, very hard to stay organized. So I actually downloaded the app today. So I'm showing you screenshots of my app. When you get in there, what you're going to be able to do is click through the agenda day by day. So you can see there's Wednesday the 11th, Thursday the 12th, Friday the 13th, and Saturday the 14th. And then you can press the plus button and actually create your own schedule for where you want to go. If you look at this red arrow right here, it tells you that intentional inclusion, all rights for all women, trans, cisgender, and gender diverse people, is on Imperial 5A level 4. So this app is going to be how you're going to know where to go and when. I suggest you download it early and play around with it, figure it out, because I know that's not intuitive and it's not easy for everyone. So I wanted to kind of highlight that for you before we even jumped in. We'll also put the link to the app into the thread, the chat thread, and we'll email it around after in case you need it. Barb, you want me to go through travel reminders? Yeah. All right, so a couple of travel reminders. You must check into your flight about 24 hours before you take off. That's just general policy. For some airlines, the sooner you check in, the better seat you get. It's not true for all of them, but for some of them. So I always try to check in right at the 24-hour mark. You're going to want to make sure you have an acceptable form of photo ID on you. That might be a driver's license, a passport, a permanent resident card. If you're worried that you don't have it, we can do a little research and look into what you need. Remember to put your medications and some spares in your carry-on. It happens every year that someone's luggage gets separated from them. And so you want to make sure that you have at least a handful of the essentials like medications in your carry-on so you have access to them even if something happens to your luggage. You're going to want to contact Mobility City of Greater New Orleans if you're in need of a mobility scooter or power chair. I have not gone through that process, but if you do need to go through that process, there is, NMAC helps you do that on the website. Just so you know, the average temperature in New Orleans is mid 80 degrees, but the conference rooms, at least for me, can be very cold. So although there's no dress code, official dress code for the conference, I highly recommend that you bring a sweater or a jacket, especially if you're a person like me who runs a little bit cold. Bring your PWN, and if you have it, your Health Not Prison shirt. We're gonna have pictures, especially wear your PWN shirt on the first day, full day of conference, so that we can get our PWN picture together. And then the last tip is to leave extra room in your baggage. There's almost for sure going to be some extra like swag that you're going to take home with you. And so you want to make sure that you have enough room to put all the goodies in there. And then finally, just a couple of conference logistics to remember. Food-wise, lunch is provided every day during the lunch plenary. Those, like Kiva said, it like fills up very, very quickly. Or someone said it for lunch plenaries. You need to make sure that you get in line so that you can get that food. But breakfast and dinner are not going to be provided. So that means you're going to be most of the time on your own for breakfast and dinner unless you have something else planned. There are going to be some small stacks at like the exhibit hall, the poster session, the reception that's on the first day, but I wouldn't count on too many other meals than lunch. Communication-wise, let us know that you're coming to USCHA. Someone's going to put in a link into our chat so that you can actually sign up to let us know that you're coming to USCHA. We're going to add you to our WhatsApp group. That way you can have someone you can contact in real time on the ground if something goes wrong, if something goes right, if you want to tell people about where you're at in the conference, if you want to, I don't know, go out to dinner with a couple of people. It's a great way just to communicate with a whole bunch of different PWNers. For on-the-ground transportation, just know that conference sessions are going to be held at the Hyatt Regency in New Orleans. That's 601 Loyola Avenue, New Orleans, Louisiana. Some people are staying at the conference hotel, so some people are staying at the Hyatt Regency. Not everyone is, so you might have to plan in for a little bit of travel time to get there in the morning. I also called them this morning. There is no shuttle from the airport to the conference hotel. I would recommend, if you're not at the conference hotel, give your hotel a call to see if they have a shuttle. And if they don't, use the PWN WhatsApp group. Try to organize a ride with other folks who are driving around the same time. And finally, for lodging, if you have received an option B scholarship, please know that it only pays for 2 nights of lodging. We don't want you to get caught off guard by that or get stuck with a bill that you weren't expecting. So that is just a little bit on some of the logistics. And with that, I'm actually going to pass it back to Marnina because we're going to have a bit of a facilitated conversation so that folks can talk about what they're looking out for at USCHA.
All righty, thank you, Kelly. So with that, I'm going to ask some of the folks from our panel discussion to join me up here. So Malcolm, also you, Kelly, again, Barb and Antoinette. I want to start with Antoinette. What is the key issue that you're looking forward to talking about at USCHA?
Can y'all hear me?
We can hear you.
Awesome. So, sorry, on from 2 devices. So something that I'm looking forward to at USCHA is how the facilitators of these workshops, as well as some of our federal providers, our federal partners, and our community is utilizing MIPA. For folks who are new to MIPA, or this is your first time hearing about MIPA, MIPA is meaningful involvement of people living with HIV and AIDS. So I'm looking forward to see how we can, how we are supporting you all with making sure that the spaces that we enter are MIPA centered.
And I'll pass that same question to Barb. What are some of the key issues that you are looking forward to talking and discussing with folks at USCHA?
Yeah, thanks, Marnina. So I always pay attention to MIPA and where we are in MIPA free zones, especially where people are talking about services they're providing for people living with HIV without actually having talked with people living with HIV about those services or programs. But I'm going to be paying special attention to status neutral and whole person wellness. And absolutely, for me, just a little bit of an overview so people have a sense of what we're talking about here. Status Neutral is a program where the CDC has said that they want to provide services and programming for people regardless of their HIV status. And it gets kind of complicated because that sounds like a really great, and it is a really important and critical issue. We believe in that everyone should have access to transportation and housing and healthcare, that that's a human right that everyone should have. And when we talk about programs for people living with HIV, especially, we need to be careful that we are asking lots of questions to make sure that when these programs are being implemented, that they are not impacting services that are being provided for people living with HIV. And so originally, the CDC was calling it status neutral. They heard that we did not like status neutral because our rally cry was status neutral is not neutral for people living with HIV. And so they've changed it to a kinder, gentler, whole person wellness and whole person care program, which again, we absolutely 100% support. However, when we're talking about programs that are designed to support people living with HIV, we know that there is not enough housing, that there is not enough access to healthcare, that there is not enough transportation funding for people living with HIV. And so we need to make sure that when we hear this come up and they say, we want to make sure everyone has access, that we're asking really critical questions, including where is the funding coming from and how is this impacting services for people living with HIV? So that was a long answer to that short question, Marnina, but I wanted to give people a little bit of framing so that when they start hearing it come up, that they can tune their ears to start asking those questions.
Thank you for giving us that well-rounded context, Barb. And I'll throw that question over to you, Malcolm. What are some of the key issues that you're looking forward to discussing at USCHA?
So first of all, so thank you for having me. And one of the first things that I'm looking for is my honorary PWN sweatshirt so I can take the picture with you guys. That's the first thing. But really, as far as issues are concerned, I'm there to look at quality of life for people living with HIV. And the second thing that I'm focused on is people aging with HIV. And that includes dandelions, that includes those of us who contracted HIV later in life, but are living a long time with HIV. So what advocacy around those two things? So when we talk about quality of life, I'll be representing the USPL HIV caucus at the Institute at 8 o'clock on the 12th. And that is the Institute, and it's called Advocacy for Quality of Life for People Living with HIV, a boot camp training. And what we're going to do is we're going to launch a survey, and we're going to ask people living with HIV, as well as our providers and allies, what does quality of life mean to them? And then we have just a series of questions about what is the most important thing about quality of life for those people, and what are they looking for? And then the survey goes on to segregate those of us who are living with HIV so that we can get some more detailed answers. So we'll be posting that survey here in the next couple of days so that people can register for the Institute and can fill out the survey prior to the Institute so that we can have a conversation. Once we have the answers to the survey, then we'll have some community conversation around those answers, and then try to formulate our advocacy agenda. It's something that we've designed as an ongoing training. So we'll be inviting some people to join the caucus, as well as work with us to develop that ongoing training on quality of life, ongoing agenda on quality of life for people living with HIV. The second thing that I'll be working on are 2 workshops for HIV and aging. One is on that same day, on the 12th at 1 o'clock, and it's called Age, Science, Action, and Advocacy, a comprehensive workshop on HIV prevention for those for people aging with HIV. And I'll be working with Sage on that workshop. And then on the 13th, Ronald Johnson, myself, Ronald Johnson of the USPL HIV Caucus, myself, and Kevin Lish of the Zero Project will be presenting Navigating Medicare. You know, as we get older, we find out that there's a whole lot of folks living with HIV that don't understand Medicare. And when you get to 62, 63, you start getting bombarded with all of these advertisements about Medicare and everything else. And the people that are advertising it don't have any idea about HIV medications and what that looks like. And so we're going to be talking about, you know, what is best, what people with HIV should look for when they're registering for and signing up for Medicare. We're also going to talk about an advocacy point that just came up, and maybe a lot of people haven't heard. HIV medication, Medicare has Part A and Part B, and then Part D for your drugs. HIV medication is considered Part D, and it is a Tier 6 drug, which means that basically means that the copays are very high. The copays are like 33% of the cost of the medication. And it's been that way for years. And we've been advocating to get that down under the Infrastructure Act that Joe Biden signed. Next year, the main out-of-pocket, the top out-of-pocket will be $2,000. But lately, they are working on the White House Office of National AIDS Policy, and a bunch of other people are working on getting PrEP as part of Medicare Part B, which means that it will be sold, you know, in pharmacies, but it'll be under a different part of Medicare, and there won't be any copay. And we're like, well, wait a minute. You know, and this is something like that Barb is talking about. When we talk about whole person wellness and we talk about status neutral, you know, what we've noticed is that there's a lot of focus on prevention. That's great. We're for that. However, treatment is prevention, treatment as prevention. And so if you're telling me that as a person living with HIV, I've got to come out of pocket with these huge copays on Medicare, but you can get PrEP for free on another part of Medicare, that's not something that we're going to sit idly by and let happen. So we want to make sure that we're advocating for that. So we'll be talking about that in that workshop. And that is on the 13th at 1:40 in the second session. They have sessions that are session 1, session 2, session 3. It'll be the second session on the 13th. And then finally, the affinity session on 14th on Saturday evening at 5:30 is going to be a community event for people living with HIV over the age of 50. So we're working with NMAC and Zero and PWN and a bunch of other organizations to put that on. That's going to be a fun social networking event. So yeah, so for me, it's quality of life and it's aging and advocating that people who are living with HIV are getting a fair shake as far as our medication is concerned, our treatment is concerned, and that it's not all about PrEP. Like I said, we want people to have access to PrEP. We want people to have access to prevention, but understand those of us living with HIV who are taking our medicine are actively preventing HIV.
Thank you for that, Malcolm. And I'm so used to organizing alongside y'all that I did not give you space to introduce yourselves to other members and other folks that may be listening. So Malcolm, if you could tell our members and our listeners a little bit about yourself. And
Wait a minute, you mean everybody doesn't know me?
For those who may not know you.
Okay. I'm Malcolm Reed. If you do know me, a lot of people know me when I was with Thrive SS. I'm no longer with Thrive SS. I started my own organization called Unity Arc Advocacy Group. And right now the group is aspirational because it's just me. But we are going to be a group of advocates and speakers who are going to go out and speak and facilitate about, you know, living with HIV, health equity, for people living with HIV, as well as just health equity for people for underserved communities. And so, thanks, Antoinette. Yeah, the Atlanta folks know me, right? So yeah, so that's me. I've been working with Barb and Kelly and Marnina and Olga and Wanda and Tana are working with me on the survey for the institute. So yeah, so I have a lot of roots with PWN, and I'm always happy to work with y'all.
Thank you, Malcolm, the honorary PWN member. I'm gonna throw the same question to you, Kelly. What are some key issues you're looking forward to at USCHA? And let the folks know what your role is at PWN.
Amazing. Thank you, Marnita. I'm going to dive into those questions. And as I do, I'd love to see in the chat, I'm curious about this. Can I get a yes if you've been to USCHA before and a no if you haven't? I just want to see if we have newbies or a lot of returning folks while I dive into this. Yes, I've been into USCHA. No, I haven't. So hey y'all, my name is Kelly. I use she or they pronouns and I'm PWN's policy director. I also help support in the Health Not Prisons Collective. PWN, as Marnina went over, is one of the organizations that's a part of HNP. I guess a little bit of background, since I'm going right after Malcolm, what I'll do is I'll shout out the caucus as doing a particularly wonderful job through things like demanding better in their federal advocacy, in pushing the federal government to do better in thinking beyond the biomedical, right? PrEP and medication and treating people like people living with HIV, like all folks have to do is just take enough medications and we'll be fine, is not an approach to actually supporting the wellness and quality of life of people living with HIV. And so one of the aspects that I'm going to be focusing on, that's one of those structural barriers that folks have, is HIV criminalization. It is one of those policies that discriminates against people living with HIV. If you haven't heard of HIV criminalization before, this is one of the ways that people living with HIV are punished or punished more severely through the criminal legal system purely because they're living with HIV. I think a lot of people in this call probably have heard of HIV criminalization before. So I'm actually going to be focusing on two related issues. HIV criminalization, I'm going to be listening to hear who's talking about it, who's really thinking of ways to center MIPA in how we're working to end HIV criminalization on the state level, how we are mobilizing our federal partners and pushing them to do more on ending HIV criminalization, since HIV criminalization has actually a lot to do with federal actions. We can talk about it later if you want to, but it's something that makes me frustrated. So in addition to listening out for criminalization, I'm also going to be listening out for something called molecular HIV surveillance. I think we've probably had a lot of conversations around criminalization, and maybe you've heard less about MHS, which is molecular HIV criminalization. So I'm going to give just a little bit of background on what that is, and then Marnina, I'll turn it back over to you for any further conversation. But molecular HIV surveillance is a controversial public health practice that actually uses the HIV genetic data that is taken from people living with HIV, oftentimes without their consent, and then used to track sexual and social networks of people living with HIV. Now, I want to be clear, this is a public health practice. The idea behind it, the positive framing, is that the agency here is the CDC. What they are doing is trying to track HIV genetic strains to see where is HIV transmission happening, and then we can put resources in that area. However, right, we don't live in like a decontextualized space, right? We live in a world of policies, of practices, of power, and of prejudice. And so when you are talking about surveilling and tracking people living with HIV without their consent, without their awareness, we really need to have hard conversations and push back more firmly against the federal government. I'll go quickly into how this happens because I think that that's actually a really useful way to understanding how this practice has gotten kind of as widespread as it is. If you've ever had if you've ever gone through resistance testing, your information your HIV genetic information is probably being indefinitely stored by the federal government, just so you kind of understand where we're at. So in routine resistance testing, blood samples are actually, taken in order to inform doctors about which kinds of drugs are going to best manage your HIV. So the important part is resistance testing happens for your direct medical purposes. It is something that is done to say like, okay, let's try to make sure that you're on the medication that's going to best serve you. However, without the consent of the person living with HIV, that genetic data is then used in a second way. So it's stripped of identifying information and shared without that person's knowledge or consent for uses outside of your own medical treatment. So the way that that's used is public health officials actually analyze the HIV genetic data and then try and see which strains look similar. And if the strains look similar, then what they're trying to do is track down, is there some sort of HIV transmission happening in a community, so that they can then try to intervene. We have a lot of issues with how this happens. We have issues about the lack of informed consent, the fact that HIV criminalization still happens in 30 plus states, that this data is not adequately protected. So there's no guarantee in many, many states that the police can't take that data and then weaponize it against you in the court of law. That there wasn't actually enough meaningful input of people living with HIV. There was no input of people living with HIV when this policy was initially rolled out throughout the United States. Lots of issues that we can dig into that I'll be listening for, but I'm going to pause there so I don't take up too much time and pass it back to you, Marnina.
All right, Kelly, thank you for that in-depth look into MHS. And also, I'm going to pass this question back over to Antoinette. What are some questions? Because I heard you say that your key issue that you're going to be talking to folks about at this year's USCHA is going to be around MIPA. What questions will you be asking, and what organizations or partners will you be asking these questions to around MIPA? And how can folks talk about MIPA in a meaningful way?
Thank you, Marnina, for that question. Oops, sorry. So one thing I want to say is that MIPA is not my issue, it's our issue. Like, we all have to make sure that we're carrying MIPA, and that we're going into these spaces demanding MIPA. So I think for me, I want folks to be able to leave this call and go to USCHA and ask themselves, like, looking at the sessions and how Kelly was showing us the app. So I also downloaded the app, but I'm more of like a hands-on person. So I had to sit down this morning and write out all the sessions that I'm interested in, all the sessions I plan on attending. I broke them down by like, oh, this sounds like something that I would love to attend, but this also sounds like something that I can grow in certain areas. This sounds like something I'm curious about. So I actually wrote it down. And for folks who are like not so tech savvy like I am, and you prefer to have something more on hand, I recommend that you visit the website, look at the agenda and write it down so that you can already know where you're going to be at, or when you're having conversations with your fellow sistrans in this fight, like, oh, where are you going to be? Oh, this is where I'm going to be. So write it down. That's what helps me. But in looking at the sessions and seeing all the ones that I'm interested in, I had to ask myself, and I encourage folks to ask themselves if they see, do I see myself in this session? Do I feel like I'm included in this workshop or that I'm seen in this workshop? If it's not somebody of my same identities facilitating, do I see my community members represented? Who's leading this workshop? Do I feel like the facilitator is incorporating the lived experience of women living with HIV, or has a reason behind why they are facilitating this conversation? Maybe they have a connection to community. Something else that I asked myself, does this session look like it will have anything that is discriminatory, that lacks or perpetuates HIV stigma, racism, sexism, or classism in any way? And I do that by asking myself, once again, who's facilitating this conversation? How are the people living with HIV included? And then what language is being used in this discussion? So when you start to think about language, you want to listen out for anything that is harmful or offensive while you're in that space. And that's coming from the facilitator, how they are managing some of the harmful language that might come up in the conversation, and how they are once again including people living with HIV, and how they are centering the experiences of people living with HIV. So some great practices that are, and then also the other thing that I think about is if this space is gender affirming, if it's inclusive, if this is a facilitated space for people of trans experience or people of non-binary experience, Is the facilitator non-binary or gender expansive? I just look at things like that, and I encourage folks to look at that as well. Questions that you can definitely ask the facilitator or federal partners or anybody facilitating conversations while you're in that space, and you want to have more in-depth conversations, not just about the workshop, but how they are doing work inside community. You can ask them as far as like, oh, what percentage of your organization is of lived experience? Do you have a board that has people of lived experience on it? Are they represented? Are they at decision-making tables? Who is your go-to leadership in when it comes to HIV? And then do folks feel reflective? Do folks feel respected in the constituency that you all serve? So when you're talking about doing on the ground work and you're attending a session where they are saying that they work specifically with community, you can ask them more questions like, oh, how did they respond? Sorry. How do your community members respond to your programs? What has worked for you? What hasn't worked for you? And different things like that. So a few ways that you can continue to practice MIPA, even after leaving a session. Now, this is for you. And this is some things that I plan on doing, is finding unique ways to translate the information that I've gathered at USCHA to the community at large, or to women living with HIV who may not have been able to have the opportunity to be in that space. Commit to build leadership and power of the community that I serve. So if my community is dandelions and lifetime survivors, then that's where my commitment lies. My community is women living with HIV, cisgender, and trans, and that's where my commitment lies. So anything that I'm grasping from this space, I want to make sure that it reaches my community, whether it's advocacy or leadership trainings, whether it's any type of mentorship conversations, whether it's opportunities for grants or collaborative networking and things like that. Like for me, that's what I think about when I think, okay, MIPA, not just in the space, but when we are leaving the space and how we are taking the information with us. And I'll be complete with that. I hope that answered your question.
No, you did amazing. Thank you so much. Like, and I hear Baby a Lyric in the background, another honorary PWN member. But that was such a tweetable quote that MIPA is not my issue, it is our issue. And you are so right, Antoinette. It is our issue to make sure that organizations, partners are upholding MIPA in all of their spaces. So thank you so much for that. And thank you for that amazing reminder. Barb, you talked a lot about like status neutral and whole person wellness that folks are now rebranding. How are you planning to hold folks accountable around talking about status neutral and whole person wellness as the erasure of people living with HIV? And who are you strategically going to be asking and targeting for these asks?
Yeah, that's oof. So I have gone ahead and I've shared the one pager that PWN and the caucus put together, because whole person wellness is something that oftentimes folks are worried about bringing up because they feel that they don't understand it or it's too big. But it is really something that we want to make sure that people feel prepared to talk about, because when we go back and we talk about the implementation of the status neutral programming and now the whole person wellness, we want to be really clear. This is a MIPA free zone. Status neutral was not something that people living with HIV had the chance to provide feedback on, to ask questions about. There were a couple of folks that were involved with status neutral programming in the New York City Department of Public Health, which is where this program was developed. And it worked very well in New York because they had lots and lots of funds. When it shifted over to the CDC, there was no conversation about how it was going to impact our programs, how it was even going to feel to us. Because for me, my status doesn't feel neutral. My status feels pretty charged. And so even that language we pushed back. And like I said, we've got them to pay attention to it. But now, when we talk about the whole person wellness, it continues to be this same concern. So I'm going to pretty much talk to anyone, but especially folks that are living with HIV, because I want to mobilize our community to be able to ask questions about where the funding is coming from, how it is impacting services for people living with HIV, and to really talk about especially sort of this intersection, because a lot of times when we talk to people about whole person wellness or status neutral, they say, don't worry, it's covered in the ending the HIV epidemic funding. And it is part of that. But here's the piece that nobody ever talks about, is that the jurisdictions that are covered under the ending the HIV epidemic, there are 57 of them. They are states, and there's only 7 states, and there's only a few jurisdictions that are actually covered under that plan. And so when we talk about what the funding is on that, it doesn't come to a lot of states, it doesn't come to a lot of counties, and it doesn't come to a lot of jurisdictions. So if there is ending the HIV epidemic funding, that is great. But if there is not, like in Colorado, we have no funding there. So when they talk about Colorado having to implement status neutral programming, they're talking about it not just at a clinic level, but at an AIDS service organization level, and there is no funding. So that starts shifting. They're very fond about talking about braiding funding. So, you know, again, it can feel really complicated. It's not. It is basically like, if you're talking about a program that is serving both people who are living with HIV and people who are not, where does the funding come from? It can't come from Ryan White funding, because that is mandated, that it can only be used for the care of people living with HIV. But there are some times, and we have caught some instances where they have talked about using Ryan White infrastructure. So clinics and doctors and case managers and all of that is being paid for by Ryan White funds to support people who are vulnerable to acquiring HIV. That is taking away services that are provided for people who are living with HIV, because we know case managers can only see maybe 30 people a week if they're really turning it over, probably more like 20 people a week. And so if half of them are people who are vulnerable to HIV, that takes away services from people who are living with HIV. So questions are, where's the funding coming from? How are you protecting services for people who are living with HIV that are still such great unmet needs? And Malcolm, I see you got your hand up that you want to go ahead and add something in about that.
Yeah, so and I believe at the Ryan White conference, and I wasn't there, but I know that an email went around about 2 sessions that were talking about using Ryan White funds. And again, we know that Ryan White funds are mandated for the care of people living with HIV, but they're trying to go around that and trying to come up with all different types of strategies to go around that. And I just want to give Barb her props, because with the caucus, when Barb first brought this up, we brought this up at several meetings. One of them was FAP, and some people in FAP were going, no, that's not happening. Don't worry about it. It's never going to happen. It's never going to happen. But yet now at the Ryan White conference, we see that the conversation is moving forward. So, you know, advocacy is important. And again, we want to be really clear. We're not against whole person wellness. We're not against prevention. We are against the funding for people living with HIV being used for people who are not living with HIV. And that's it. So thanks, Barb.
Yeah, thanks, Malcolm. And there's one piece that I want to sort of say that I found out about the Ryan White conference. So there was a status neutral program that was covered at the Ryan White conference that was talking about housing for, you know, some vulnerable populations. And it was very interesting because the city that they were talking about was funding. So the funding came from Washington, D.C. And basically when we talk about it, it's like, okay, so what we know is that there's a huge unhoused crisis of people living with HIV in Washington, D.C. So when we talk about funds that have shifted and services that have shifted, that could very easily have been providing housing for people in Washington, D.C. who are living with HIV. And again, Housing is healthcare, and the interconnectedness of, again, this program was set up and it didn't include people living with HIV, and how it was going to be implemented to ask the really difficult and challenging questions. So I will go ahead and I will stop there, because as you can tell, I could probably talk about this most of today.
No, thank you for that, Barb. I appreciate that. And Malcolm, Barb uses them, they pronouns. So
Yeah, I know. I'm so sorry.
no, you're fine. You're fine.
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask you, Malcolm, what are some of the questions that you will be asking at USCHA? Because I heard you talk a lot about HIV and aging and quality of life. So who are the partners that you'll be talking to, and what are some of those questions that you'll be asking?
So I will be mainly talking to a lot of our federal partners. We had a meeting today with the ONAP director, Francisco Ruiz, and we're putting together a quality of life summit, if you will. And so just talking to people about what quality of life means to them, because, you know, quality of life is not the same for everybody. And for some people, it's about, you know, housing. For some people, it's about transportation. For some people, it's about medical care. A lot of us, it's about all of the above. But we're trying to figure out what are the most important things when dealing with quality of life. And, you know, for those of you who don't know, you know, maybe new to this advocacy, you know, the CDC, HRSA, all of those governmental agencies, the alphabet soup of governmental agencies, if you will, they always talk about quality of life. Well, you're getting your medication and your access to care. But understand that, you know, access to care is, I have a place to take my medicine. How about that? You know, don't just give me my medicine and then send me off. But I'm homeless and now I have to try to find a place to store my medicine, or I have a job where I'm working different shifts and I don't have any place to take my medicine in peace. Quality of life is about stigma. Quality of life is about all of those other things. So we'll be talking about that, and I mainly will be focusing on a lot of our federal and state partners who are providers and who are not understanding that. And then as far as aging is concerned, I think one of the major federal agencies that we'll be talking to and advocating around is the CDC. Many of you don't know that the CDC has an HIV testing guideline that starts at 13 and ends at 64. Which says, okay, people after 64 are not having sex or cannot possibly acquire HIV, which we know is true. I'm going to be 67 in 2 days after we get home from USCHA.
You look good, Malcolm.
Thank you, darling. So I'm trying to, speak for people who are my age, who are still enjoying life and still enjoying a pleasurable sexual experience, and just want to be careful and want to be able to have access to everything that they should have access to. And so we just need to spread the word that, hey, we need to remove that upper age limit. There shouldn't be an upper age limit. And then just other, the Older Americans Act. The Older Americans Act was reauthorized, and people living with HIV and in the LGBT community were designated by rule as a population of greatest social need. However, the Older Americans Act ends at the end of this year. And so we want Congress to reauthorize it and make that part of the bill instead of having it by rule. So we've got to do all of those things and make sure that we're just making people realize that things are better, but we're not there yet. People want to take their, if you notice, not one of our political candidates, not one of our candidates for president, not one of our candidates for Senate or Congress has mentioned HIV in a very, very long time. And we have to keep that in front of their face and make sure that, hey, we're still here, HIV is still here. And, even though the End the Epidemic plan was set to, end HIV, the epidemic by 2025, and it's now 2030. Okay, well, what are y'all going to do with with those of us who are still living with HIV after 2030? Let's make sure that we are still advocating for those of us who are. So that's what I'm going to be talking about.
Thank you for that, Malcolm. And I'll give Kelly the last word for our panel. What are some questions that you'll be asking? I know you talked a lot about MHS. What are going to be some of the partners that you're going to be talking with about MHS?
Oh, yeah, that is a big one. So one of the things, so first off, like the folks that you need to talk to about MHS are the CDC, the Center for Disease and Prevention. You need to be talking to health departments, actually. So on the federal level, we talk to the CDCs. They're the folks who are able to make the change that we need to do things like, I don't know, have an informed consent procedure before you like indefinitely store someone's HIV genetic data without their awareness. How about that? Or to require that states have health data privacy protections to make sure that your HIV data can't be weaponized against you in criminal, civil, or immigration courts. So you have this kind of like these federal partners that you can talk to. But then I'm going to be honest here, everyone, like we've been talking to the CDC about this for years. Before I was with PWN has been talking to the CDC about this issue, and it's really, really hard to move them. And so what we've been thinking about a lot is who can we put pressure on, who can put pressure on the CDC. It's a secondary target. Because the CDC just really isn't that interested in MIPA around MHS. We've heard all of our panelists talk about the importance of MIPA when MHS was rolled out as a policy that literally every state in the US had to adopt in order to receive HIV prevention funds. Networks of people living with HIV were not adequately consulted or brought into the process. So MIPA's been missing from the start. So who are other folks that we can pressure as well? We're not going to give up on the CDC just because it's hard. That's not what we do. I don't know if folks were at USCHA a couple of years ago. We've had multiple demonstrations at USCHA trying to call out our federal partners and demand that they be better federal partners. Some of the other folks that I'm going to be talking to is PACHA, the Presidential Advisory Council on HIV/AIDS. They actually provide recommendations to some of our federal partners on HIV policies. And PACHA actually has our back on this issue. So I'm going to be talking to PACHA and asking them about, what are your next steps? How are you going to help us demand that the health and human rights of people living with HIV are respected and protected? Whenever I'm in a session with someone from a public health departments are the folks who have to implement these policies. A lot of our health department partners don't like MHS. Right? They don't like that it alienates community members, that it makes folks feel like they can't trust the health department because something is happening behind the backs of people living with HIV. That's how it feels. They also don't like that this can be an ineffective use of resources sometimes. Health departments know their communities. They know where HIV transmissions are happening. So this data isn't always the most useful and actually takes resources away from other areas, we've heard. So I'm going to be asking people in health department, like, what do you hear on the ground? What is the actual impact of doing MHS on your community and on your relationship with people living with HIV? And then finally, I'm just going to be talking to everyone. I think that we don't talk about MHS enough. We really need to understand that the intersections between surveillance and criminalization, these things are linked together. When I hear people talking about HIV criminalization, we need to be talking about the surveillance systems that treat people living with HIV as though your human rights are able to be kind of just pushed aside for the sake of public health. Like that is stigmatizing. That is treating people living with HIV like your fundamental rights are not fundamental because we can sacrifice them in the name of public health. I don't believe that. I believe that we can have public health and we can respect and protect the rights of people living with HIV. And I'll fight for that world every day. And I'll pass it back to you, Marnina.
Thank you, Kelly. And I want to thank all of y'all, Barb, Antoinette, Malcolm, Kelly, for being on this panel today, for telling us some key issues to look out for at USCHA and for informing us about how can we uphold all of these issues that y'all stated, whether that was MIPA, talking about ending status neutral, MHS and HIV CRIM, or quality of life and aging. Thank y'all so much. And then
All right.
I'm gonna pass it on over to Kelly to talk about where to find us at USCHA. I saw folks in the chat asking, and also put questions in the chat. I saw a couple of questions about USCHA, but I want to see a little bit more other questions that y'all are holding. So do not be shy. Let us know in the chat what questions you're holding. And I'll pass it over to you, Kelly.
Awesome. I'm going to run us through this relatively quickly because I really want to get to the questions that you all are holding. So this is where to find us at USCHA. This is where we're going to be. On Thursday, September 12th, starting off the day, there's going to be PWN's Women's Institute, Intentional Inclusion for All Women, Trans, Cisgender, and Gender Diverse Folks. There's Healing Justice for Longtime Survivors and Long-Term Survivors. And there's the caucus event that Malcolm was talking about, advocating to improve quality of life for people living with HIV, a boot camp training. So we're going to be in all three of those places. If you're looking for someone from PWN, attend one of those and then find us. We'll be wearing our PWN shirt or our caucus shirt or our H&P shirt. Thursday continued. We're going to be everywhere. We're going to be at the plenary. Find us at the PWN table. Stay after the plenary and take your PWN photo with us. So wear your PWN shirt on Thursday. On the work session 1, we're going to be at Age, Science, and Action, advocating comprehensive HIV prevention for older communities. That's where Malcolm's going to be. We're also going to be at the Pacha listening session, thanking them and asking them what they're going to do next to end HIV criminalization and address community concerns around MHS. For session 2 from 4 to 6, we're going to be at Modernize, Repeal, Decriminalize the fight against felony prostitution laws and women living with HIV. And then finally, find us at the welcome reception, Southern Joy, Southern Bounce. So what I highly recommend is if these trainings are of interest to you, go ahead and plus them on your USCHA app so that you remember that you're going to come to Modernize, Repeal, Decriminalize because you want to see me in Kenya there. I'm going to be there supporting Kenya. Next day on HIV criminalization. If you come there, we are going to have some MHS swag, so highly recommend. We're also going to be at expanding the HIV and aging response with urgency, action, and intention. Once again, for the lunch plenary, find us at the PWN table. Come sit with us. We want to talk to you and hear about your day. Then from 2 to 4, we're going to be at what you're not going to do is exclude us. And then finally, we're going to roll out at the end of the day from 4:15 to 6:15 with lessons to navigating HOPWA and housing challenges, advocacy, and opportunity. Valerie, who is on this call, will be presenting there, and PWN staff are going to be showing up to support her. Saturday, the day before the last day, we're going to be at 9 to 11. We're going to get a little bit of a sleep in, and then we're going to go to Women's Voices, a crucial part of HIV decriminalization advocacy. Once again, find us at lunch. Come hang out with us. And then from 2 to 4, we're going to be at including trans folks and combating stigma in faith-based organization. Myra's actually on this call. So is Kiva and Barb and Alex, I believe. So a lot of folks from that 2 to 4 session. And then from 4:15 to 6:15, we'll be at Liberation Way, creating inclusive spaces for Black women in HIV, which is by our PWN Louisiana chapter. And we're going to be at Strong Black Women, from Property to Power with Marnina. On our final day on Sunday, we're going to be at our first set of sessions from 9 to 11 in the lunch plenary. And then everyone's going to leave, and you're going to see PWN staff members. We're just going to be kind of milling about a little bit with our shirts to make sure that we're there and able to support you as you are heading out. All right, and now I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen and turn it back over to Marnina because we're going to answer your questions if we can.
All right, for those who can't see in the chat, I wanted Barb to be able to talk a little bit more about our t-shirts that'll be available at USCHA. I know folks are wanting to get their hands on a PWN shirt, so tell them how they could possibly get one.
Yeah. So it's gonna be, we're gonna have shirts at USCHA. We got 200 of them. in a wide variety of sizes from small all the way up to 4 extra large. The challenge is going to be that we do have, you know, only so many in each size. And so it's going to be challenging to have people ask us to save them. So right now we're saying that it is a first come, first serve sort of approach. But we're going to go ahead and we're going to talk about it at PWN. Marnina, if you and Kelly and I could talk about it and see if there is a way where perhaps we can figure out what sizes people need and maybe hold some. But right now I'm just going to say we can't promise that, but it's going to be, we will have shirts there. And so just to find staff when you are registering on Wednesday or on Thursday, we'll make sure you get one.
Thank you, Barb. And I wanted to bring up Malcolm because I saw it in the chat too. It's unrelated to USCHA. Well, actually it is. It could be. I saw someone in the chat ask, is PrEP free? And I know that Malcolm has worked a lot alongside folks who are giving, who make sure that folks have access to care. And you've worked at Thrive as us before. So is PrEP free?
It can be. Let's just put it that way. So, so the answer is it can be, and it depends. It depends on where you are, where you live. There are so many. There's no right or wrong answer to that. The main thing that I was talking about was when I compare Medicare, and this is just Medicare. When I compare Medicare Part D, which is where I get my Dovato from, because I'm on Dovato, and when it's a tier 6 drug, and unless you have access to a pharmaceutical company like ViiV who has a patient assistance program or other patient assistance programs that are out there, then you pay a 33% copay. Well, Dovato is $2,900 a month, so 33% is $900, right? But what they want to do is they want to put PrEP on Medicare Part B so that it is handled like some of the other legacy drugs from back when Medicare was first created. And then it would be sold in the pharmacies, but it wouldn't be, it would be given out in the pharmacies, but there wouldn't be a copay. And so, those are some of the things that we're working on. Now, I will say that they are also working on Cabenuva as part of Medicare Part B. So, we're like, okay, well, if you can do it for Cabenuva and you can do it for PrEP, why can't you do it for regular medication, regular tablet medication? So those are some of the things that we're doing. But like I said, PrEP can be free depending on what you have access to and where you are and everything else. But just like anything else, there are people that are paying a large amount of money for PrEP as well.
Thank you for that, Malcolm. Thank you for that. I definitely didn't know the answer to that question, so thank you for answering for me. And I'm gonna pass it over to Miss Mary because I see that Miss Mary also has her hand up.
Hi, everyone. Not so much a question, but more of a comment and a suggestion. I did this last year, and I'm gonna kind of review it at the end of USCHA this year. I highly recommend, especially if you're new to going to USCHA or any conference really, or even if you're a vet at going, to journal it, starting from the moment you get on the plane and then all the way through until you get back home. I did this last year and it kind of helped center me, and I was very overwhelmed. Okay. I mean, for those of you that it's your first time, you're going to be overwhelmed. Just don't even trip. You're going to be overwhelmed. So find one of us from PWN and we can help walk you through, answer any of your questions. But again, take that time, whether it be during lunch or during dinner, or if you're an early person, I'm not, but if you're an early person, take like 10-15 minutes just to jot down like what you're feeling, how you're doing, what stood out good for you that day or what you're hoping to get from that day. And then sometime in a month or so, look back on that and kind of see what came up for you and how that changed you. So just a suggestion from me to y'all.
That's a beautiful suggestion, Mary. Thank you so much for that. Self-care is going to be super important. It's going to be important to capture those memories. And yes, you'll have pictures, but being able to journal in real time about how you're feeling. Oh, that's so important.
In real time, it makes a bigger impact on you, is what I've noticed. Because you're getting those feelings that are happening at that moment rather than, you know, the day before or sorry, the day after or 2 days after even. So you're getting that real in time reaction to whatever's going on.
Thank you for that. That's beautiful. A beautiful reminder. And how else do you take care of yourself during USCHA, Mary? If you don't mind me asking, since we got you up here, I want to know, how else are you taking care of yourself during USCHA?
So following USCHA, I'm going to be going to Positive Living, but I'm doing like 2 days before and 2 days after. So every year, usually Positive Living is like my vacation. So that's my self-care for like the year. I go there, I either go to the beach or I stay in the pool. Either way, you're gonna find me near the water.
Thank you for that. Thank you for those reminders about taking care of ourselves and really journaling in real time. Shout out to Colorado. Y'all, I also see a question in the chat, and one of the questions is talking about the pre-conference Black in the South. Miss Green asks, because I just found out in last week, it looks like the prices for Black in the South increased to $100. Y'all, originally it was $50. And things can get a little pricey, as we know, attending USCHA. If anyone knows of any other discounts for Black in the South or a discount code to attend Black in the South, please let us know. We'll be able to share with other folks. And if folks could put in the chat, raise your hand. Let us know if y'all know of a discount code for Black in the South. And also, please take a minute to fill out a form and let us know that you're coming to USCHA. It is in the chat. Barb has posted it for us to be able to let us know who's all going to be at USCHA, so we can put you in our WhatsApp group. And so that we can make sure that you are taken care of during USCHA, so we can be on the lookout for you. So make sure you're filling out that form. So let us know so we can add you. Any other questions, y'all, about USCHA? And the host, I also see in the chat, the host of Black in the South is Marvell Terry. He is on social media. So you all, I see LaDon put that in the chat for us. So reach out to Black in the South. Go to blackinthesouth.com. You should be able to also, there's an email address for them as well that we could put in the chat for y'all for Black in the South. Also see Miss Mary has her hand raised again.
Sorry, forgot one thing.
No, you're good. Go ahead.
I've never been to New Orleans, and I think it's the same hotel that they've done USCHA before. Is that correct?
I've never been to USCHA in New Orleans. What I have heard is that previously USCHA got canceled because USCHA is during hurricane season.
Right.
So previously
Okay.
it was supposed to be in New Orleans a couple of years ago.
I ask only because for mobility issues, you know, like how much walking there's going to be. I've seen the maps, but like I don't know where the rooms are compared to where the lobby is, you know?
So
figure that out.
the hotel that the conference is in is huge. So just think about it. There are going to be probably 4,000 people at this conference. So any conference that's that big, there's going to be a lot of walking. So if you can contact the hotel, and I think in the beginning, in one of the earlier slides, I believe Kelly showed the slide about,
Yeah.
you know, mobility and getting a scooter. If you need any of that help, then I suggest you jump on that, because, you know, not even thinking about getting around New Orleans itself, getting around the hotel is going to be a lot. You
Is
know,
it bigger
that
than the one at DC?
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
comparable. Yeah,
It's in the same place that it's been before, and it is that big.
yeah.
It's a huge hotel.
Okay, I will do that. Thank you.
There's the info again. But yeah, I would say everybody should wear your comfortable shoes, and if you insist on having cute shoes, pack them in a bag. Pack them in a bag. We'll make sure everybody has 2 minutes to put on your cute shoes before our PWN photo. And but yeah, you're gonna want to be comfortable.
I don't even bother wearing any cute shoes during USCHA. It is so much walking.
I
It
bring
is.
my
Wow.
cute shoes and I literally leave them in my room. So I will probably pack them. You can do a cute shoe check, but it'll be in my bag. It'll be in my room.
And for those for mobility issues, Barb has also listed it in the chat. So to contact the Mobility Center of Greater New Orleans. Thanks again, Mary, for that reminder about mobility issues. Want to make sure that we are taking care of all folks. So the name of that is the Mobility Center of Greater New Orleans. If you need a mobility scooter or power chairs while navigating New Orleans. Any other questions, y'all? Any other questions around USCHA? Any other questions y'all are holding? And also,
I'm sorry, I was looking for how to raise my hand, but I just wanted to say if you have a mobility chair, you can bring it for free on the plane. Okay, that's all.
thank you for that, Genesis. It's nice to hear your voice.
It's good to see you too.
Yeah, I was going to suggest that too, because that's what I do. I bring my rollator, which is a walker and a wheelchair together. I always put mine on a flight with me for free. So, but if you get tired of walking, use that to step in. But if it's going to be as big, if it's big, like it's big as you guys said, because I know Puerto Rico was big, I was even tired with my rollator. So it is best looking for the mobility that Barb showed to get a scooter for the conference place.
Thank you for that, Olga. I have not been to this particular hotel. However, Kiva just dropped the floor plan for the hotel in the chat. So you all will be able to see how big the hotel is and how we will be navigating the Hyatt Regency in New Orleans. Any other questions y'all are holding about USCHA? Anything around any other questions that we're holding? I see Valencia's hand.
Hi, so you mentioned the Black in the South Summit, but there's also USCHA FATE conference as well, pre-conference as well, that's at the hotel on the same day as Black in the South. I found that online. And if I think it's when I look, it was like $50, but there is a scholarship. If you just use the word scholarship in the discount code, it was actually free. So for those that may be wanting something to do, they can't go to Black in the South.
Thank you for that, Valencia. Can you drop that website in the chat for us so that folks will be able to go to it and navigate it?
Okay.
Thank you so much. So that's that FATE and HIV conference.
Yes.
Okay.
And this is Lisa. Hey, I had dropped something in the chat earlier. I was just wondering, does anybody know if there's any discount pricing for anything for parking? I am flying, but my other half is driving. So, and I called the hotel, it's $57 a night plus tax. That's like $60 a day for parking. So anybody know of anything offsite, something, discount pricing? If there's a group rate for parking for USCHA, can somebody let me know?
Miss Lisa, it was kind of hard to hear you, but I think you were saying, are there any options around some discounted parking at USCHA? All
Mhm.
right. If anyone knows any discounted parking, let us know. We'll also have a WhatsApp too, so that folks will be able to connect to after this call. But if you know, and I also saw that Kiva listed some parking available that was quite pricey, but there is some parking available. So Kiva did list some in the chat, Miss Lisa, for you as well. And there is some veteran parking below, and I know you're a veteran, so there is some veteran parking that someone else has posted in the chat. Miss Green has posted in the chat for you. Before we head out of here, y'all, any other questions we talked about that you want to talk about or bring up for USCHA? I saw that some folks are going to be new attending the conference. That is so exciting, USCHA. Even though we talked a whole lot about all of the things that may be a little bit overwhelming, it is fun. Have fun during USCHA. Take all the time you need, take the rest you need, but make sure that like fun is on the number one list for your priorities. USCHA can be a lot, but it's a time that we can convene together and be able to build and network with each other. Take breaks. I see that Antoinette is saying take breaks also and have fun in the chat. So take those breaks, take what you need and take the time you need to take care of yourself and not overwhelming yourself throughout this process. And utilize what Miss Mary said, journal. Journaling is a great way to be able to take care of yourself during USCHA. Any other questions we have before we head out?
Okay, one thing. I don't know how far away the Harris Casino is,
Uh-huh.
but if it's not far, then you can park at Harris and get a card like you're gonna gamble there and get on the penny machine for 30 minutes. That's the cheapest parking downtown that you'll ever find. Okay, that's all.
And
No,
Harris
thank
is,
you for
and I
that.
believe,
Thank you. The Harris Casino. Okay.
Paris is kind of far
All
from the host hotel, though. I think the host hotel is across the street from the Superdome.
right. So y'all got some suggestions on parking. And I saw LaDon is asking about some food over at USCHA. We'll definitely have a WhatsApp group. So here's our call to action, y'all. Sign up for the PWN WhatsApp group. So LaDon, I can guarantee you we're gonna be talking about food during that process. We're gonna talk about food, where to hang out, where to link up, where to get a good drink if you are a drinker, and where to link up and meet other folks.
I got y'all. I got y'all. Morals, Dragos, Deanies. I got y'all. I got y'all. I'm coming home. I got y'all.
Thank you for that. Thank you. Thank you so much. So make sure you're downloading the USCHA app. Make sure you are downloading the app on your phone. It's available on iPhone and on Android. And find us at USCHA and take a picture at USCHA, hashtag PWN at USCHA. Y'all, we want to make sure it is trending. There's going to be over 100 PWN members this year at USCHA. And we want to make sure that this is trending, y'all. I cannot wait to see each and every one of y'all next week. I know me, Kiva, and the rest of the PWN national staff are so excited to be amongst y'all. So I can't wait to hug on y'all, love on y'all, and see everyone at USCHA this year. And without further ado, we can end this meeting, y'all. But thank y'all so much for being on this call, for taking some time out this evening to talk about the ABCs of USCHA. And shout out to the PWN national staff who are always holding y'all in their hearts and making sure that we're relaying the best information that we can, and to the panelists, Malcolm, Kelly, Barb, and Antoinette for being on the panel today. Thanks, y'all. Have
Thanks,
a good
everybody.
evening. See y'all soon.